Great, now Google kicked in. Great, perfect. So in today's session, I will be talking about tracking in the age of privacy. This session is a rerun from our very successful in-person event last month in Berlin in collaboration with Target Global, a tier 1 VC here in Europe, in the beautiful office of Flink in Berlin Mitte. Today, we'll talk about the changing landscape in terms of tracking, the challenges faced by marketers and data professionals, what can we do to mitigate risks, and also use this opportunity to take the game to the next level. I am Candice. I'm one of the co-founders here at 173 Tech. We are a modern analytics agency. We support companies, very fast-growing ones, throughout their data journey. We're very much end-to-end support, so all the way from data strategy, implementation, to taking the most value out of your data. Previously, I was the head of analytics at Bumble, creating the data stack there from day zero all the way to supporting 500 million users finding love online, and also to its 3 billion exit in 5 years. I have here with me our co-founder, Robin. Robin, would you like to quickly say hi to everyone? Robin, can you hear me?
I think we lost Robin there for a moment. Maybe you should just carry on, Candice.
Oh, sorry, no worries. I will do a quick intro for Robin then. He's our co-founder, marketing analytics guru, also ex-Bumbler like myself. He'll come back and share with you the second half of the presentation. So I wanted to start with a quick fact. So almost 3/4 of consumers rank data privacy as their top concerns based on the study in 2023. Out of all these privacy-conscious consumers, 42% continuously reject cookies. I know I'm one of them myself, and also 21% of consumers only that are confident their data is being used for proper purposes by companies. As a result, the first year since the release of GDPR, about 23% of contacts was lost by organizations. So there's no doubt the landscape is changing. Just a quick recap of the timeline in the 5 years leading up to the world we are in right now. So May 2018, GDPR became enforceable in Europe. And not so long after, Google announced the fact that they plan to block third-party cookies. But the current ETA is set at mid-2023. And as a matter of fact, it has been already tested on Android devices. And not long after that, in 2020, Apple introduced the ATT App Tracking Transparency Framework. We wanted to make a note here, there has been no restrictions on the use of first-party data as part of the ATT. So ATT was then subsequently released in April 2021 in the iOS 14.4 rollout. Not so long after that, Facebook decided to deprecate their advanced mobile measurement model. So what AMM does is to provide the device-level data on campaign for users who are attributed to Facebook. So what does this mean for marketers? So first of all, the last point was just described before, anyone coming from Facebook campaigns, you no longer have the device level data. And not only just for iOS, so iOS you have completely no visibility, and there are limited visibilities for Androids as well. Second of all, if you have a web traffic coming in for users who disable the web cookies, you no longer have the visibility of the source. And finally, for users who did not consent for ATT, you will have no visibility on the acquisition source, not on the device level and not on the aggregated level either. So we want to make a quick note on Google Analytics 4. As most of you would already know, Universal, which is the current version, is being sunset in July 2023. There are a lot of discontent in the market about this particular fact, but also the changes that is putting forward in Google GA4. But we wanted to mention from a data perspective the reasons why you should migrate as soon as you can. First of all, GA4 provides a log level data for free, which can be imported directly to your BigQuery instance. That is the data warehouse as part of the Google stack. Previously under Universal, for you to obtain this device level log, you will have to upgrade to GA360, which come with a hefty price tag at 150K per year. So this is completely free in GA4. And second of all, GA4 now follows a much more event-based tracking. It allows you to track across multiple platforms, so giving you a greater visibility across the user journey, both on web and mobile. So given the changing landscape in tracking, what should you do as a marketer? So no doubt you have to start taking actions. Here are our 3 top tips. First of all, make sure you evaluate the tracking that is needed. And once you got to that user journey, which we'll come to in a moment, start identifying what is possible versus what are the potential blind spots. Once you've done that, making sure looking at your most valuable asset, this is your first party data. Nobody knows about your customers better than you do, and the answers are all within your data assets. And once you've integrated your first party data, marketing channels, now is the point to take back control of your marketing attribution in order to optimize towards LTV, so more optimum optimizers towards the lifetime value of a user. So first of all, I want to take you through a web journey. So here's an example of a D2C product. So Emily is looking for a vitamin tablets to boost her immune system. So the journey she's likely to go through, she would have Googled about the vitamins D3 and subsequently came across some Google ads she clicked on. When she clicked into the website of the brand, now things are being tracked by GA4. So there's the web traffic, all her behaviors within that. She read a lot of really good content within the website and decided to sign up for the newsletter. At this point, she's been captured by the brand, creating a first-party user ID, and subsequently the brand targeted her with CRM efforts via the Klaviyo, the tool this brand is using. And from this email, Emily clicked on it and made her first purchase. So you can see across this user journey, the data points coming from Google Ads, Google Analytics 4, Klaviyo, and finally the backend database, which is likely to be Postgres or whichever one you are using. And within this journey, the tracking size are, first of all, the first touch, which is the UTM parameters being tracked when Emily landed on the website. When she signed up for the newsletter, we now have the first-party user ID. And when she received a Klaviyo email and clicking on that email to the website, the second landing, we have UTM parameters. And these parameters will show that Emily came from a particular email, what is the title, for example, and a lot of useful information together alongside of that. The potential blind spot in this tracking is for the users who have disabled the web cookies. Here is another example, but this is a web flow. So similarly, Emily is craving for a particular product, searching for it on Google. She went through a similar user journey, searching, being retargeted by Facebook, downloading the app. Keep in mind, this is a mobile flow. And following that, she made purchases, and a few CRM activities via Braze, and certain LTV touch points following. So the main differences here is if you're on a mobile flow, then you need an MMP, a mobile measurement partner, to help you understand which source Emily came from. So in this case, we listed Ahrefs. There's a lot of other tools out there like AppsFlyer or Branch. And the other differences is here we have a few more lower funnel events that we are describing here. And the blind spot here, as opposed to website, which is the people who did not consent to cookies on the Webflow, the major blind spot are people who did not consent for their ATT on the iOS side of things. Before I hand it over to Robin, I wanted to share another quick fact that acquiring a new customer is actually 7 times more expensive than retaining an existing one. This goes to show how important it is to make the most out of your first-party data, to make sure you extend that LTV, the lifetime value of a customer, as long as you can. As we mentioned before, nobody knows your customer better than yourself, and the data you hold is the key to that. And Robin, I will pass it on to you.
Cool, thanks, Candice. Yeah, I guess I will because I would probably introduce myself quickly, considering that my laptop crashed at the very beginning of the webinar, which was very convenient. But I am now fully back. So yeah, so my name is Robin. I guess maybe Oliver, I guess, might have said a few words about myself, but very briefly, I am the other co-founder here at 173 Tech, usually taking care of all the implementation of our project. And I actually initially started my career in marketing and not in analytics. So yeah, so obviously I have quite a bit of breadth of experience there, and then gravitated a lot in, I guess, the marketing analytics sphere over the years of my career. But yeah, so as Candice mentioned, so obviously now the main question when it comes to marketing analytics is how to basically get there and avoid basically all the nice privacy traps that exist nowadays. So the first thing that we recommend to all of our clients is really to basically start simple, right? And not reinventing the wheel. So typically the marketing analytics effort usually starts with effectively centralizing your reporting. And when it comes to doing marketing analytics, most of the time you really have 2 main components or 2 sides of the coin. You have all the data that exists into the various marketing platforms that you might be working with. So this would be, for example, Google Ads, Meta, etc. And then you have you might have basically some attribution partners, so the MMP, as Candice mentioned, if you're more in the app ecosystem. And then after you have all the other side of the coin, which is all your first-party data. And that typically comes from it might be your backend systems if you're an app, or if you're on e-commerce, you might be on Shopify, for example. So this is basically where all your customer data lives. And really, marketing analytics is effectively a union of these 2 data sets. And most of the effort is really on starting to effectively being able to use the marketing data that you have to attribute basically the users in your backend. So you can start basically combining all the metrics that you have on the marketing side of things from the marketing platforms to your own first-party data and metrics that are more relevant to your business, such as registrations, revenue, etc., and going beyond basically short-term metrics to actually being able to attribute longer-term metrics to basically your marketing activity. And typically when starting, we usually basically get started with deterministic models, which are basically the simpler view to get started with. Obviously, the main benefit being that these are simple, but the main downside being that they are basically missing part of the story due to the basically privacy gaps. And so kind of some key benefits of the centralized reporting. So obviously the first one is really the flexibility. So one of the great benefits of having your warehouse is that you can then start designing your marketing reporting exactly as you want. So I think probably one of the main things is that, each of the marketing teams, depending on the business, might have some slight differences in how they like to report things or organize their own basically customers, maybe split of channels, for example, or naming. So that is something that basically a warehouse can actually do very conveniently. You can also calculate any performance metrics really beyond basically what you would have into your marketing platform. So where basically combining these 2 data sets becomes really interesting is when you start looking into maybe ROI calculations, or maybe having some data science algorithms on the product side that you want to basically cross-reference with the marketing performance. So by merging these two data sets, you can have everything all together and maybe start, for example, looking maybe at cost per retained users, for example, which is something that might be quite interesting. Or, for example, we initially came from Bumble, where one of the core components within Bumble was to control the gender balance within the ecosystem. So a lot of our measurement was basically taking into account basically a few metrics such as retention, gender ratio, as well as long-term ROI. The third component is really that basically controlling the attribution mechanism, make sure that you can ensure that all the processes are really privacy friendly and that you are not basically reliant on, I guess, the goodwill of a third party to make sure that they comply with privacy measures. And then the fourth point is that you can really control your attribution and basically design it and build it exactly as you want it to be. Again, here, every business is different. So most of the time you might start with a first or last click attribution, but when you actually get into more sophisticated marketing, quite often you would realize that even if using one of these simple models, you could tune a few things such as the window of the attribution that you want to look into, or that you might need basically more complex models that you can basically completely design with a warehouse. And then, so I guess maybe another fun fact for that presentation. So thanks to our good friends at McKinsey, we have another stat, which is that obviously being data-driven enables you to acquire customers much more efficiently, which they're actually measured to be 23 times more. And so once you have basically laid out all the, I guess, solid bases when it comes to reporting, so what you effectively want to go is to obviously go further. And then, so that is when you start basically looking into probabilistic models, which is basically the best way to actually start compensating for all the lack of tracking that basically privacy has created. So the first step is obviously you start from your basically first-party data, which gives you the first view that you have on marketing, on what is being tracked. And then you basically complement that with effectively a layer of information that you have about the consented users. And effectively, that is what you use to start basically building some basically statistical models to effectively start correcting the metrics that or basically the performance that you are actually seeing by the effective levels of consent rate that you have. So let's say, for example, let's say in a very simple way, if you are tracking about 50% of your users, you should effectively correct your metrics by 2 times to account for the other half that you are not seeing. But obviously, having this processing to the warehouse can enable you to make it completely dynamic based on the evolution of your consent rate, track the consent rate over time, and effectively correct any of the metrics that you might have, such as, again, revenue, maybe ratios such as retention rate, based on the consent rate that you have at any given point in time. And this is actually a process that we have gone through, with many clients over time, both on web and on app. The thinking is effectively the same. The main difference being, again, how basically consent works depending on the ecosystems. And so then one of the main effective benefits of being able to connect the basically your first-party data to your marketing data is effectively the main shift that it can provide when you move from probably short-term optimization, which is usually basically one of the directions that mostly optimizing on platform data leads, because you effectively have to optimize completely on metrics based on tracking, which basically can't really bake in a lot of logic, to starting to optimize towards much more long-term metrics. And one of the most common metrics that a client typically want to start optimizing towards once they have that visibility of connecting basically both ecosystem is LTV. And especially LTV, but predicted from an early standpoint. So quite often, let's say, again, if you work on a subscription business, for example, let's say that you have a pricing of, let's say, £10 a month. Effectively, if you optimize towards, let's say, just a subscription, you actually have no indication about what might be the quality of the subscription at the moment the person basically clicks on the button subscribe. However, you might have quite different behaviors in terms of the population that you have within your subscription base, right? And that is when you start looking at retention and what might be the LTV over time of a users, right? So you might have basically some users that might stay for 3 years, and which would basically lead to a LTV of £360. Some of us might obviously maybe just cancel after a month, leading to an LTV of £10. And so obviously, if you're in a marketing team, you cannot wait for a year or two so that you can start making performance shifts, especially when it comes to digital, which generally gets optimized much quicker than offline channels. And so that is where, again, having a connection to the warehouse can become so basically useful, and that you can really leverage as part of your growth strategies. And the way to do that is to actually build some predictive algorithms within your warehouse that can effectively predict LTV quite early on within the life cycle of a user. So, and the main reason being that you effectively want to give feedback to the marketing platforms as early as possible. So here you want to find a balance of how quickly you can get to a fairly accurate LTV estimation, so that you can basically have both speed but also accuracy. And the idea being that, for example, for that subscription model, based on, let's say, maybe the first day or two of activity, you might start being able to bucket users based on the LTV that you might predict. And let's say, for example, you create 5 different buckets, which, the higher the bucket, the higher the LTV prediction you might have for that user. And you can start basically sending that back to basically the marketing platform, so that they can start optimizing on these early signals. And these are techniques that we have used for quite a few clients. We actually use that for a client called PedLab, which is in the e-commerce sphere. In their case, we actually use the concept of a subscription multiplier, which enabled them to basically save about 15% of their marketing spend, which was about 3.5 million basically savings on a yearly spend. And that can really basically help you, uncover a lot of optimization possibilities and optimization techniques by basically merging the 2 data sets. And then so that nicely leads into the concept of data activation, so which I guess I briefly touched upon on the previous slide. But effectively, once you start having all that information into your warehouse, the next thing that you want to do is basically optimize all your growth techniques on basically the different platforms that you are using. And that is something that you can do very simply nowadays by what is now becoming the field of what we call data activation. And data activation is really effectively using all the logic you have into your warehouse to basically leverage the information to effectively tune the activities that you might have as part of all your marketing channels. So, for example, CRM is one area where we basically see a lot of data activation happening. So again, for example, you might have different segments within your user base, and you want to basically maybe onboard them in slightly different ways, or you want to send them maybe slightly different communications as they basically evolve through the journey. And that is something that you can do with data activation, otherwise known as reverse ETL as well, when you look into different tools, which are effectively tools that you can automatically connect to your data warehouse to send back pieces of information from the logic you are calculating into the warehouse to the different tools. So for example, you could set basically custom audience lists, maybe let's say, for example, your top 10% LTV customers, or maybe customers that are maybe purchasing a lot of, let's say, t-shirts or design t-shirts. And you could send that back to maybe your audience list, your different marketing channels, etc., to basically help basically the marketing activity. You can also, again, in the same way we're describing before, send custom metrics as early signals of LTV to optimize basically of any of your campaigns. And you can also basically use that to optimize as well the front end of your product. So basically tailoring the customer experience, in close to real time by basically passing some information about the user that the warehouse has been segmenting. And here, so basically just a few, I guess, examples of some of our happy clients. I guess Candice probably and Oliver probably touched upon that earlier, but we work basically with quite a varied basically set of clients across multiple industries. But obviously, mostly in fairly, I guess, data-heavy environments across basically digital apps, e-commerce, and B2B. And then finally, we have basically a quick example to give you what a modern analytics stack looks like. So typically, we have basically the data sources on the left, and then you go through what is called an ELT process. So you go through the extraction, which is typically automated. Then you have the warehouse where all the data is being stored. at which point you start the process of what we call data modeling, which is the organization of the data within the warehouse, so that data can be consumed very easily by reporting tools, analysts, or data activation processes. And then at the basically front end of the process, you have the reporting tool as well as the data activation. And that's all, folks. So yeah, I guess I will leave, the stand to Oliver for the Q&A session.
Thanks very much, guys. So I'm going to turn on everybody's microphones. If anyone's got any questions or they could raise their hands, that'd be great. Hi, well, just a second. Seem to be having some technical difficulties today. Do you want to put your question in the chat, Will? No, we seem to be having issues. Okay, see if you can turn on your microphone now.
Hello.
There we go.
Sorry, and I was nearly about to be finished writing my message, but yeah. So this is Will from Mubi. First of all, really great presentation, and yeah, really helpful. My question really it's quite a broad one, but it's around whether you have any general commentary or thoughts or advice around making the most of say Meta ads as conversions tracking, and so they have a conversions API. And you can send data back to them to map, like website conversions, for instance, and app installs. I was wondering if you had any thoughts about the reliability of that. I know there's some modeling, for instance, that goes on their side. It's a bit of a black box. We know that we send data back to them, but yeah, I'd love to just hear any thoughts about how effective you find that as a solution for clients, or any typical pitfalls that you've seen for clients to do a lot of meta spend and use the conversions API.
Yep, thanks, Will, for the question. So. Yeah, but as you said, I think I guess the first thing to mention is that, as you said, basically the meta conversion API can be a bit of a black box, as you mentioned. So it's not always super straightforward to know exactly what's happening. But typically, really, the main thing, and that's probably true, I think, for all of the different channels, and not necessarily for Meta, but basically sending back all your conversions directly from basically what you effectively measure within basically your own centralized solution is basically much more reliable, and for many reasons. The first one is that typically the main problem that basically happens when it comes to relying on conversions from any of the providers is basically effectively duplication across all of the channels, right? So if, let's say, you have a user that effectively basically sees an ad across, let's say, Google and Facebook, both of them will report that conversion. So effectively, sending back the conversions to your different partners is basically the first way to actually have basically an accurate view within each of the systems, but also on your end within your centralized solution, having an accurate view across all conversions. Now, the second benefit of actually using, I guess, the conversion API or basically any other of your custom metrics is also the flexibility that it can give you. So one of the main benefits that we see when typically people start towards optimizing on what is effectively within the warehouse is that you have much more flexibility in terms of optimizing towards basically meaningful events. And what we mean by meaningful is actually events that include more logic than, let's say, just sending effectively maybe a specific conversion, which might be very bound to a specific point in time, right? And for example, retention is often a very good example, because retention can be very hard to send back just as back of pure event tracking, depending on the logic that you might want. And that is basically when starting to use basically the conversion APIs can become very powerful, because you have data that typically comes from your own processes, which is usually of a higher level of QA. And then after, basically, the platforms can do their own, dark magic to basically cross-match effectively, basically effectively people, on their end.
Yeah, just to
Great.
quickly add to that point, is selecting the metric. So what is the gauge for your business for a quality user? And there's a balance. You want to make sure there's enough numbers to be sent back so the platform can optimize towards it. That's where the LTV prediction comes into play, because if you send back LTV, very likely you have very small data points and you have to wait for a long time. So it's about finding out which metric, defining that precisely, modeling that within your data warehouse, and sending back to the API conversions.
Great, thank you. Thanks both.
Cool. Do we have any other questions? You should all be able to unmute yourselves if you'd like to ask a question. Go ahead, Rory.
Hey guys, Rory from Mubi again. We are considering or planning to do a lift study later this year at Mubi to try to get a better understanding of the overall impact of our paid media activities, but I think also as a kind of secondary objective to understand the impact of different marketing channels, because that again is an area that we don't have full clarity on. I'm wondering if this is something that you've worked with your clients on before, and if so, do you have any sort of best practices you could advise? I think we have quite a few questions, but I think one of them would be around time, to circuit break our kind of ads activity. Do we need sort of residual periods before and after, before, in terms of like not measuring, sort of allowing the data to be cleaned? Yeah, any sort of advice you could give us would be greatly appreciated.
Just, I guess, before we get to an answer, can you confirm, are we speaking of incremental lift on conversions, or are we speaking of awareness lifts? So are we speaking of brand or DR measurement?
I think DR.
DR, okay. Cool, yeah, so I think, data's typically actually not necessarily an area that we work a lot on with our clients, and the main reason being that typically all these effectively studies are provided by the platforms themselves, right? If that makes sense, because they are the one that basically have the control over the data. However, what basically what you can do on your end again on that front is, when you effectively do basically the studies, what is really important is to again make sure that you really assess basically what are the metrics that are going to be very important to measure upon, right? So obviously, when it comes to doing conversion lifts, what you want to ensure is that you are looking at basically long-term maybe revenue, for example. So you might want to obviously have some first metrics which might be faster, such as obviously the conversion that might be in registrations or subscriptions from the get-go. But as we mentioned, you ideally want to have a set of metrics which are predicting maybe longer-term LTV, and to make sure that these are being passed back to the provider that will effectively do the implementation of basically the incremental lift basically for you guys. And the main reason why these are basically very hard, obviously, to do purely on your end, is that you need to have a way to control the A/B testing mechanism, which that is obviously purely in the control of the advertising platforms themselves. And then basically the second advice would be, obviously, as in terms of basically periods before and after that, where you want to do these studies, typically they should be going through an A/B test process, through the platforms, which is typically what we refer to as the gold standard when it comes to doing basic experimentation. But obviously you want to make sure that when you are doing that in a market maybe which is fairly stable, where you don't have basically too many things that might impact potentially or create a lot of volatility in the data that you might be seeing, right? Because obviously the more stable the other factors remain as you are doing that, basically the better it is for the interpretability of the results. And probably the last thing worth mentioning is that, maybe one of the downside of these experiments is that typically they are really centered around one channel only, right? So they might help you understand maybe, how basically the impact of let's say Meta on its own or Google on its own, but they probably lack a bit of the overall view effectively of the impact of each of the channels. And so in this case, that is where basically the centralized solution become probably a bit more agnostic in terms of performance evaluation, right? Because in this way, you can actually start having a look based on the activity that you might have done, effectively, what has been the impact maybe over time, and if there is any changes in terms of the structure of the performance that you are seeing, but comparing that across all channels that you are seeing effectively within your marketing performance.
Got it. Thank you.
Go ahead, Nick.
Hi, this is Nick from Find Your Fun Studio. Just a general question. Do you have any recommendations for how to follow a DSAR process? Basically, if a customer basically says that they want to delete their data for privacy concerns, do you have a recommended flow process that we could use?
Yeah. Do you want to take it, guys, or shall I?
I can start, and maybe Robin can chime in as well. So when it comes to customer data, there's two sides of it. There's the analytical side, so it's which is a consumer of the raw data you collect, and then there's the operational side, which is typically the where you capture the data, and the analytics side is really using the data to make the insights for the business to optimize towards. So you should have safeguards on both sides. So from the analytics point of view, never import PII data. So it should be quite safe within analytics side, and then the question lives within your operational data. So here, making sure you have a good policy in place, making sure you have all the tracking standard, where data is stored, you have a clear list of event tracking, and from there on, you can, with the identification of the user, start deleting once a user is requesting to be forgotten.
Yeah, and just to add to that very briefly, so I mean, typically, as Candice mentioned, so basically the analytics is really just a consumer of your operational data. So when such thing happens, it really should start within the operational data itself, where effectively the data should be basically deleted there. And then basically what happens is that what you can do at that point is that you can maybe trigger full refresh, for example, on the analytics side of things, if you also want to pass that deletion through the analytics standpoint. Depending again on the level of privacy that you might want to have, but you might consider that just obfuscating completely the information about that user, but still having them in aggregated stats is fine. But if you want to delete everything, then you can just refresh all your data throughout the downstream processes. You could maybe also store, for example, let's say a table with specific user IDs that might have asked about deletion in the operational database that you can bring over to the warehouse and ensure that in any of the data modeling that you are doing, all these user IDs are completely deleted basically on a regular basis. So you can automate basically all these flows.
Sounds good. Yeah, makes sense. Thank you.
Cool. Yes. Any other question?
I think we've got a few minutes left, so I'll ask a question. Oh, we've got one. Go on, Rico.
Hi there. Actually, it's not a question. It's more of a comment. I just wanted to say thank you to the three of you. Hi, everybody. My name is Rico, and I am formerly from ThriveDX. And I just wanted to shout out these three. We engaged 173 Tech for a huge data and performance marketing project. And they moved very quickly. They brought a level of insight in data intellect that we didn't have. And they were seamless, bolted right on to our team, working very closely with my head of data and insights person. So I just wanted to give you all a shout out. I enjoyed the presentation, by the way. So thank you so much. And I hope we get a copy of it potentially after. But everybody on the call, these three are the best. And thank you, Candice, Robin, and Oliver. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much,
Rico.
Rico. It's really kind. Great to see you here.
And great presentation, by the way.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cool. I was going to ask a question. We've got 2 minutes. I might go for it anyway. I guess, guys, the laws and the privacy updates, they're happening pretty much thick and fast, almost on a weekly basis at the moment. I guess a concern for a lot of people would be coming up with a solution that takes time and then finding that they need to change that solution. What advice would you have for people in this world where things are changing quite quickly?
Yeah. So I think, I mean, on that front, I mean, obviously things are changing very basic dynamically and quickly, as you said, but I think probably the bulk of the strategy and the direction probably change. I would say that, that much. I think realistically the principles remain the same over the long term. I think it's more effectively adapting and reacting to privacy changes that might happen, but these are typically maybe a bit more incremental changes. I think depending as well on where you sit. So obviously, if you control your own attribution and your basically marketing analytics tool stack, you actually have much more flexibility over controlling the impact of these things, because you typically already have data processes in place that do the bulk of the logic, and then effectively reacting to privacy changes just becomes more some improvements or reorganizations on part of the analytics reporting, as opposed to if you are maybe reliant much more on third-party solutions or effectively over tools to do your reorganization, then you are effectively kind of really tied to how they deal with data. And so that can potentially impact you much more, if that makes sense, and prevent you to be reactive as quickly as owning your own stack. And the second thing to briefly touch upon as well is that obviously if you own your processes, that means that a lot of things might go through maybe basically cookies that might be a bit more permanent, for example, as using to relying on cookies from third-party services, etc. So you also have benefits, or maybe using server-side tracking as well, which is a bit more permanent. So you also have some benefits of investing into your own ecosystem to have a bit more visibility and basically coverage over time.
I just want to add a small point to that. So we looked at the known and the unknown. With the changes coming up, you will have an increasing unknown, but throughout the user journey, we looked at the unknown really happens at the beginning of the funnel. When they become your customer, go back to the point that it's 7 times cheaper to retain one than to acquire one. Your first-party data doesn't change. You fully own that. It is yours. You can make the most out of that. So it is an opportunity as well to focus more on what you already know and make the most out of it, which is what we tend to see being overlooked in the current market.
Cool. Thanks very much, guys. I think we'll call it a wrap. I will be sending out a recording and the deck to everybody probably tomorrow morning, so look out for that. And thanks everyone for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Fine, guys. Bye.
Thank you, guys. Bye.